Thank you. Andrew Bihun from the Washington Group. I'd like to ask a question of both of you, ambassadors, about the upcoming, again, the Vice President Biden trip to Ukraine, and what can generally be expected here. One area of certainly conversation over the last several months, and it was mentioned also today, would be the reconstitution or rebirth of the concept of the bilateral committee, or commission, similar to the Gore-Kuchma that we had back in the 90s at that time. I would just like to have your views, Ambassador Pfeiffer and Ambassador Taylor, on what would be the current, not so much makeup, but the focus on the topics that would be of great concern right now, of greater concern right now, as opposed to, or as compared to, what we had back in the 90s. Obviously, as you both know, my concern would be the economic development and the commercial side of it, and the further market reforms as topics of it. But I'm wondering what your views might be, and also whether that could be a topic at a time when Ukraine is in the position of being pre-electoral again, presidential and parliamentary, etc. So whom can that be discussed with at this particular moment? At the same time, on the flip side, is the United States the interagency so-called team that would be preparing for it? Is it in place, or it still needs considerable beefing up at this point on the governmental side?
Andy, I can't address your last question about the interagency team back here. Being pleased to not have been in Washington for the past 3 years. On the Vice President's visit, I think that certainly the idea of structuring our relations between Ukraine and the United States in a way that addresses many of the issues, not just economic, but certainly that's one of the lead ones, but also civil society, also the election that's coming up, and the importance of free and fair, and mechanisms to that other nations, including ours, have found to deal with corruption. There is a wide range of interesting topics and important topics for Ukraine that could be addressed in some kind of a structure like that. I know that was considered, is being considered. I hope from outside the government, I would recommend it, something of that structure be adopted. And as I say, the range of topics are topics that we think Ukrainians can benefit from our experience or other international experience. It's not us telling them how to do it. It is more encouraging reform, encouraging economic development, encouraging steps that can improve the lives of Ukrainians through economic development, but also through maintenance of the free media and free elections, those two kind of key points. So that structure with those topics, I think, would be a good idea.
We have to find a question on which we disagree, but no, I would agree. In fact, and I've argued, well, both in papers but also in conversations with the administration, that it would make sense to restore something like the Gore-Kuchma Commission. I think you'd have to make an adaptation this time, in that on the Ukrainian side, given the division of executive power between the President and the Prime Minister, while you would have the Vice President as the American chairman, I think you would have to have the President and the Prime Minister as co-chairs on the Ukrainian side if you wanted to make the structure actually work. But I think it's a sensible way to ensure high-level attention that does a couple of things. One, it allows a mechanism to push issues to the top and break deadlocks at the bureaucratic level. But second, it also begins to create a channel where you can begin to have a dialogue on areas where you're going to ask, I think, Ukraine in some cases to do some difficult things. One of which and it seems to me that if you had this structure, or even if you don't have this structure, one of the things that you have to push Ukraine very hard now on, at a time when there probably aren't huge U.S.-Ukraine problems on the bilateral agenda. I mean, I think between, you had most of those solved. But things like, intellectual property protection, Jackson, Bannock, WTO. I mean, those have been resolved. So I don't think if you look at the U.S.-Ukraine agenda, there are big issues. So it does give, I think, the United States some freedom to go and raise other questions. And I would say that the biggest issue has to be energy reform. And it has to be energy reform because that is probably the biggest question in terms of Ukraine's ability to, sustain itself as a viable and prosperous state. And, we all read the great drama, but today, in fact, Ukraine did pay its bill to Gazprom on time. But we're now in this situation where every month on the 6th and the 7th, that's the question. Has Ukraine paid its gas bill? And it becomes such a drama because when you look at Naftogaz Ukraine, the Ukrainian gas company, this is a company that is commercially not viable. And you can understand why. If you look at the prices that Ukrainians pay for gas for their heating their residences or for utilities, it's maybe 25-30% of what Ukraine pays to buy the gas from Russia. This is not a good business model. It doesn't work. And so Ukraine, Naftogaz is perpetually on the verge of bankruptcy. There's all of this drama, and Ukraine leaves itself hugely vulnerable to pressure from Russia. Now, when I was in Kyiv about 3 weeks ago, I raised this with a senior Ukrainian government official, and I said, you really need to move on raising prices, and then put in a mechanism that allows you then to subsidize those who are truly hurt. But I mean, there's no reason to be subsidizing the energy prices for the residences for people like Pinchuk and Akhmetov. And what I heard back was, we can't do this now because we're in the run-up to an election. And I can understand that politically, except I have heard one version or another of we can't do that now for the last 10 years. And so Ukraine remains in a situation where I think it is needlessly put itself in a vulnerable situation. So it would seem to me that, whether there's a resurrection of the Binational Commission, which I would like to see, or whether there isn't, we need to find some way to encourage, press Ukraine to address this energy situation. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have monthly drama, the potential for gas wars, and unneeded tensions in the relationship between Kyiv and Moscow.